All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Moonstruck podcast produced by Riot Radio, where we focus on the subjects of scientific spirituality and motivational philosophy. Today, we'll be discussing conscious awareness, particularly the wave function collapse, polarity and magnetism, and the aspect of entanglement, and the internal compass of the heart, or as they refer to it as the light spirit body in Egypt. So we're going to start off with segment one, and we're just going to talk a little bit about conscious awareness and a concept that we have these kind of light prism glands in the body which help to visualize things, really. So as we know, we see everything based on light. We see light bouncing off materials in the outside world. That's how we visualize things. We're not particularly seeing anything just as it is. We're seeing a reflected image. So when we understand that we might have some filters subconsciously on what we can observe and what we cannot observe. And when we start to kind of focus our attention, we start to pick up more and more details about the things we are observing and notice small things that we may have not previously noticed before. So to get into this is a pretty interesting concept when it comes to really the complexity of the human biology and understanding just how consciousness works. And I really want to make today's episode on more the perhaps philosophical end, but also the spiritual end, in the sense that there are immaterial forces out there that sometimes define what we think is possible or perhaps even probable. And the fact that these things can exist, even though they might be super rare, is something important to understand, that nothing is impossible and nothing is entirely out of your reach. Sometimes it's hard for me to kind of elaborate on those topics because sometimes I don't even know how to fully put it into words myself. As I always say, I'm just on this journey here with you guys, and I'm here to advance not just my own learning, but help you guys advance your learning too on these subjects around spirituality. So to kind of look at I'll show you this diagram which I've drew, which is not the best diagram in terms of artistic skills, perhaps. I'm no artist by any means, but what I'm drawing here is essentially you have the receptor in the brain known as the pineal gland, which senses light, and basically you have these light waves coming down and interacting with the various levels of the human body. Maybe we can actually go to the image of the chakra system. And so the eye that I've drawn here is actually related to the pineal gland, which is the indigo ray that is second from the top. And the reason why this is important is because that ray, which receives light, is actually channeled through into all the other rays or spectrums. And by doing this, you get this kind of channeling effect, really, which the light beams are then directed through various centers, and they give perceptions so that the other glands, besides just the pineal and pituitary glands, can then provide sensory information to the rest of the glands in the human body. Because if you don't have anything to be aware of, then how are you going to react to the outside environment? So it really becomes about your perception, and this perception being accurately channeled into the rest of the body. And one of the ways that this is done in a lot of traditions around spirituality and mysticism is by the power of the heart, which is actually something that is referred to a lot with Jesus. You see pictures of him with his heart on fire, which symbolizes his burning passion for really the experience of life and what it means to be a human being and have a soul and be able to realize that you are a part of the cosmos in yourself and how to utilize that to its fullest potential. So sometimes we see the heart center, the green ray you can see up there in the center of the chest. Sometimes it's also depicted as having a pentagram or star around it, or some kind of geometric shape that resembles like some kind of star symbol or something like that. But the purpose of this is that you have immaterial lines of force similar to a magnetic field, which help direct that energy through the body. And this really helps shape that overall harmony of the body. It's almost like the conductor in an orchestra, in which he's giving, I guess, cues to play in a certain way. So when your heart is out of balance, as you know, we can see from various things in life, like, you know, heartbreak or the absence of a loved one, your life feels like off, or it feels out of harmony. And that's because you have a big piece missing from the symphony, essentially. But when that piece is restored to its fullest potential, you really have the ability to influence reality to your highest potential. But not just that, but you have the ability to ascend to your highest authenticity and ability. And that is really something special as a human being, because we are constantly really shaping our own destinies by the choices we make and our actions, and, you know, the thoughts we choose to think, and, you know, how we choose to react to things in the outside world. But when you can really move through life with your authenticity and say that, you know, no matter what happens, I'm still going to try to act like myself to the best ability that I can, and not let anything hinder you or dishearten you, in a sense that, you know, maybe something bad happened and, you know, you're feeling hopeless or whatever, but you're not going to let that overwhelm you, in a sense. You're going to use that as a moment to show you that there is potential for growth and potential for opportunity. I always try to look at things from the perspective of there's never any such thing as a bad or good thing happening. There's only opportunity. And when you try to look at it through that, you realize that, you know, there's always something that you can achieve out of going through something that might be perceived as a potential challenge. So with that in mind, it's really important to kind of shape your reality and what's inside your heart kind of consciously, and really understand that doing so allows you to reach the highest version of yourself. And, you know, that's all really about what this show is about, helping you reach your highest potential and unlock the dormant powers laying within you. So, and that just doesn't go for anything physical. That goes for mentality, emotionally, spiritually. So there are really a lot of different levels for this, but as long as you have that almost conductor of the symphony in the center, all the other things will fall in line. And, you know, I can't really draw too well, so I drew a lightning bolt here, but this is essentially the center of fire, which is sometimes depicted as the yellow ray. And that really relates to the sense of self or ego that we navigate through the outside world with. And this is important because when you have that heart center in balance, then you tend not to succumb to these lower patterns as easily, such as addiction or things you would go through when you're feeling lost, or I guess fits of emotional and mental instability. As much you can be conscious of it to a degree, and you can be aware of yourself better to a higher degree. And, you know, this is all just really guidance, as I said, to have something that helps you understand that there are higher forces at play, and that if you kind of be conscious and be aware of those forces, they can help guide you, which is mostly what spirituality and religion tends to talk about, right? It's supposed to be guidance. But that doesn't mean that, it's void of work or void of anything that you have to put into it, right? It's just there to guide you and help direct the flow better. So yeah, understanding that when you have that heart center in balance, then you have your symphony resonating to a good degree. And I think that's some of the things that Jesus was trying to talk about. And as I said before, he has a depiction of a picture with him with his heart on fire. I should have actually put that in today's slideshow, but perhaps in a future episode we'll incorporate that in. But really understanding that this pentagram, or the star symbol, or however you'd like to depict it, is really representative of that light spirit body, and that when that's in alignment, this center, which is depicted of fire, which represents almost the shape that man's heart takes on, because if you think of it, plasma or fire is a constantly transcending force or transcending thing that is not necessarily, I guess, predictable in very many ways unless another force is acting on it. You can think about it almost like when you see fire or you see lightning, for example, in the atmosphere. It seems very unpredictable and where it will be directed, unless you're somehow able to, see the electrons and see the protons. And but from our point of view, it's very unpredictable. If you look at the sun, where the absence of oxygen is like there's no atmosphere on the sun compared to how it originates on Earth, where you have like these different layers and essentially atmosphere filled with air, which is burned up during the process of combustion. But in space, where you have a vacuum, if you look at the movement of the plasma around the sun, it looks very fluid-like, or very slow and calm or controlled. And the reason for that is there's the absence of a medium there, which is controlling the, I guess, stability or instability in some senses of that plasma or that force. So, and plasma and fire and lightning, those are all forms of plasma, just to clarify. But the important things out of the out of me explaining what this is kind of that when you have that shape in I guess resonance with what you want to have in your heart, when it takes on more beautiful shapes, or things that represent structures that have equilibrium and harmony to them, then they represent a more melodic flow, and your life takes on that melodic flow. But when you suffer, I don't want to say damage to your heart, but rather deep heart wounds, or you close off your heart, which a lot of us, I feel like, tend to do at certain points in our life, due to maybe the nature of society these days, in which we sometimes forget certain points of our morality. But when you have that imbalance, you have that conductor and you have that symphony, and you are able to create that beautiful shape and rhythm in your life. So understanding that you can almost forge the shape of fire within yourself that gives you life, and that gives you that willpower and that drive and direction in life, is something very, very powerful to understand, because plasma is a force that literally warps the fabric of reality around it. And if you have that in balance, if you have yourself in balance, to that degree, you will not have to worry about things being, I guess, non-harmonic in your life. There will be a resonance, there will be a flow, there'll be a certain melody to the symphony. So understanding that is really imperative to shape who you want to become is important. But seeing kind of outside of, this depiction here, this physical depiction, even though it's representing something immaterial, there's a much greater force at play here behind what this represents, and that is really the spirit, and that is really what gives human beings I would say, the power and essence to continue in your journey and have that direction in life. When your spirit is out of balance, it doesn't feel good. You feel lost. You may feel directionless or like you have no power. But when you're in alignment with that, you feel like you can do anything, like you can stand on top of Mount Everest or what have you. But the point is that the will to continue on and the spirit that you have that directs you towards your destiny or whatever you want to achieve is imperative to have if you were going to draw out your full potential. And this is kind of a complicated episode for me to actually do because it involves so many different aspects. Because here in segment 2, we're actually going to get into entanglement and that unification with the heart. But by finding that melody, which almost forges that form of fire within yourself and forges that shape within man's heart, you really entangle with that concept that you are connecting with. So for example, like say you're a boxer or you're a fighter, and you're fighting in the UFC or fighting in the ring, and you have that will, that determination to win, to do whatever it takes to be the best or to achieve something or to do something meaningful in your life. You fuse with that idea in a sense. You entangle with the idea of becoming that version of yourself. And by doing it, by visualizing it, and by taking actions and steps that would align you with that version of yourself that you want to be, you actually energetically entangle with that person out there in all the potential realities of life. So if you kind of think about it, if you're going to do a task during your day, like say you get up and you want to go do exercise or whatever, or you want to brush your teeth or something, like some everyday task that you do, usually you have a tendency to visualize it before you actually complete the task. And the reason for that is because we are constantly entangling with things in the outside world. But when you can train yourself to entangle with the things that are deeply meaningful and reflect who you are at a deep level, then you're really connecting with what it means to be one with the heart and be one with the cosmos. And that's why that image is depicted as a star shape, because it represents you connecting with the cosmos, in my interpretation anyway. So this polarity of the heart, like why is the heart able to shape this form of fire or whatever? Like how is this star symbol supposed to do this, right? Essentially what is representing, I don't know if we could actually go to the second image of the magnetic field lines, but this force that is acting on the plasma or fire is the same as the one that's acting on the charged particles or solar wind from space. It's magnetic field. So your heart is generating a magnetic field, and as shown in this picture, magnetic field lines can bend and redirect charged particles. And what is plasma? What is fire? Charged particles. So you are bending a form of the field around you, the aspect of the field that actually warps the fabric of space-time. And this is important because when you realize that magnetic center, that the heart is actually the governing force between these things that occur, you realize that you are connected to a much greater force. As talked about in the very first episode of the show, actually, where I discussed the CIA document, I actually touched on this briefly, that when your brain is in a bilateral brain state, meaning the two hemispheres of your brain are talking to each other and they're able to relay communication from one part to the other and back to the other, and they're in alignment or in coherence, and that energy of the brain is in coherence with the heart, or in a state that's actually called heart coherence, when those two things are unified, you're able to project that magnetic field over the whole entire Earth, according to this CIA document, which is, again, United States government, or United States military, rather. So this has been research stuff. This is not mumbo-jumbo science. Like, as you can see, charged particles are affected by magnetic fields. That's science. And the fact that we generate magnetic fields and electric fields in the body, that's science. So I know a lot of people will come around and say that, okay, this is just like, mystic blah, blah, blah. But, mystic blah, blah, blah and science has a tendency to overlap a lot of the times. So when we realize that mystic blah, blah, blah is not so blah, 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 and it's just science that we haven't kind of fully interpreted or understood fully yet, we have a tendency to kind of open up our awareness a bit more and kind of go to that next higher level. So the polarity of the heart and the magnetic fields influencing charged particles actually I know we're getting into a lot of big topics already, but it actually causes what is sometimes known as a quantum tunneling effect, which is where particles can travel through dimensions. I think I've actually made this analogy on this show. I'm not advising anybody to, escape some kind of cell or anything like that. But theoretically, say if you were a prisoner in jail, you can theoretically phase yourself right out through that wall if you were able to quantum tunnel it, like is described in the mechanics of quantum mechanics or anything like that. So that really gives you the power to shape your own destiny when you can phase through energy, because that ability for particles to go to different dimensions is essentially how something in physics called a wormhole is essentially created. It's a bridge that actually travels through a higher dimension and back into the one that you started from, but the space or time which has been traveled is seemingly like non-apparent because you've gone through this higher dimension and back down. If you look at this star shape, what does it represent? It's got these ups and downs all over the place, and it's basically representing this effect that particles can appear and disappear through this effect called quantum tunneling. And this really is just the ground of what you're able to do with this knowledge. I'm not saying you can actually quantum tunnel through walls yet. Maybe after like 1,000 years of practice or whatever, we'll be able to do that. But my point is that you are constantly jumping through various realities and connecting to different potentials out in what is known as a unified field, or constantly connecting to what is known as the multiverse, and where parallel versions of yourself exist, but they all exist simultaneously with each other, but resonate at a different frequencies, so they appear invisible to one another. And it's important to understand that we are constantly actually connected to that force where these realities are basically popping into existence and popping out of existence. For example, I'm going to take a sip of water right now, but there's going to be another version of me out there who decided not to take a sip of water, right? But the big thing behind that is that, when I take a sip of water, there's another version of me that did not come to fruition in this reality, or did not come to life in this reality, because I didn't take that sip of water. Our pathways in life can completely diverge because of one small action, right? Because life is built on compound effects of things happening. And I know the butterfly effect is something kind of joked about in physics, or in the concept of time travel or what have you, but really the experience of life itself is a butterfly effect. If you think about it, have you ever done something in your life which was so meaningful that it led you to evolve in other areas? For example, like, I'll tell you a bit about myself. When I was in high school, I found weightlifting when I was pretty young, and I actually, over time, when I got into later years of high school, like I think it was grade 12, I actually found boxing, and that was something I really enjoyed doing. And eventually, a couple of years later, that led me to find out all this stuff about consciousness, because I was so fixated on the idea of getting good at something, and understanding really the sport and what it entailed in terms of fluidity and movement, and a lot of things Bruce Lee talks about in terms of philosophy of connecting the body and mind. And I figured out this connection, and I started understanding things like hypnosis, and eventually I got to meditation, all these different things. But the point is that what was my point? Maybe my mind's going with age, but I think my point was that when you do something that you find is valuable, like I started off just exercising in the gym, like, a regular teenager, it led me to doing something else like boxing, which led me to doing, exploring things about the mind, and how you can be more efficient, and how you can be more accurate and precise. And that led me to exploring things like hypnosis and meditation and so on. And, here I am talking on a show about all of these concepts, right? So your life is really based off a compound effect of things happening. And the will and the spirit to do that and actively shape your own destiny is, what I would refer to as almost the sorcerer's spirit. Because if you think of it, we all are conscious beings that have the ability to bend reality in some way. And when you're bending reality, you're bending energy, or you're bending a force. So I would really describe that as you having the essence of magic within you, and the essence to change your own destiny, or shape your own destiny rather. So understanding that there is a spirit force that influences these things, and that can help you kind of have that, direct that drive really, and do so in a way that's has meaning for who you are. I would say imperative to understand in any sense of evolution for human beings, because there's so many paths we can take in life, and sometimes we just end up choosing the wrong one, and that's okay. But it's not okay to fall down and not get up, because I think that a lot of times in life you get knocked down, but you got to get up, because there is just really one way to win, and that's just to keep going. And I feel like a lot of times in life we have to experience that failure to really understand what it means to succeed. Another thing that Bruce Lee actually talked about was learn the art of dying, which actually had to do with a scene in one of his movies where he was talking to somebody who was going into a fight and he wasn't ready. And he was talking about how everybody wants to learn the way to win with never accepting the way to lose. And I think that both those things are imperative to understand before you can really accurately dictate what you want. Because if you don't have a full awareness of, what exists out there, if you're just saying that, okay, here's what I want, and here's the big picture, and I'm just going to focus on what I want, then you're ignoring all the other factors that can either help you or hinder you, depending on, how they choose to play out. So being aware of everything and then directing your focus towards what you want is really imperative to do. So also, just now that we're on the concept of Bruce Lee, I am going to do a video in the following weeks about the art of rebirth, which is actually connected to this concept that Bruce Lee talks about of learn the art of dying. So I'm calling it learn the art of rebirth, though, because I feel like life and death are one cycle, and they're both interconnected. And I feel like a lot of spiritualists or people who are on the path to evolution or changing themselves in some way that is meaningful for them have to learn the art of rebirth in order for that to happen. Because a lot of times for you to become someone you want to be, or for you to achieve something you want to achieve, there's usually a block that has occurred between you and that thing. So that means that some piece of you that is holding you back has to go. So understanding that is a pretty big concept, but we're gonna get into that on a future episode. So back to this whole concept of, the river of energy basically got here. Understanding that really when you are able to align that energy of, that light that you interpret with, under here would be like, a rock, to maybe represent the root center. And then you go through the water center, the fire center, the air center, obviously. But the point of that is that you are unblocking that river, which is essentially the creek or the river of destiny, which allows the flow of what is known as prana to flow down the river, and prana is life force. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe how to unblock that creek. And I would say when it comes to the heart and when it comes to the spirit, you really have to understand that most of this stuff has to do with things like hate and anger and fear and suffering. And when you understand that you don't need any of those things in your heart because they don't serve you, you realize you have the ability to go further than you ever thought possible. And I've been seeing a lot of clips on Instagram lately about Darth Vader edits and Anakin Skywalker edits, and I saw Star Wars when I was just a young kid, but I think that kind of revisiting some of those themes of, it is about a bigger story. Like, here's a guy who's kind of like lost everything. He's lost the love of his life, and in trying to save her, he actually ends up being the cause of her being taken away from him. So there's this actually scene in Return of the Jedi where Luke, his son, is talking to Anakin or Vader, and he's saying, I can feel the conflict within you, Father. Release your hate or let go of your hate. And, he says, oh, yeah, it's too late for me, son. But, it wasn't too late for him because, he came back. His son was able to bring him back. And I think that if we can understand the lesson of that and understand that when you do release your hate, you do have the ability to fulfill your destiny as, the chosen one, as he's called, right? That's what, Anakin was always said to be, the chosen one. He starts off the chosen one when he's, a Jedi, and, he's still the chosen one when he's Vader. And then, he comes back due to his son redeeming him, and he's still the chosen one because he does defeat the Sith in the end. But understanding that there is a reality out there, which I actually did hear a segment on this, which is what would happen if Anakin never turned into Vader, he didn't go to the dark side. And basically what he visualizes is his life with Padme, where she ends up becoming the Supreme Chancellor eventually, and Anakin becomes a Jedi Master, and essentially they both live happily ever after. And if you look at those two timelines, and they have kids and whatnot, but if you look at those two timelines, which destiny would you rather choose if it really came down to you choosing what makes you happy? Because a lot of times we can get confused, I feel, and feel like, we need to go on a quest for vengeance or anger or utilize our frustration and hate or whatever. But it doesn't really usually ever take you to where you want to go, because hate is something that, hinders yourself. It doesn't hurt the person you're directing it at. I've said this in a past episode too, and I think that understanding that if you can release that baggage on your soul, you do have the ability to get everything that it is you want, because that bitterness is not it never leads to what you want. It's usually there to be a lesson, or the thing that provokes it is there to be a lesson. And hate is almost the thing that you acquire when you don't overcome that force that you're pushing up against. So I think that's why it was kind of so hard for Vader to really realize what he wanted to do. You can see in that moment at the end of Return of the Jedi, when he's looking at Luke getting electrocuted, and he's looking over at his son, and then he's looking back at the Emperor, and then he keeps looking back and forth, and then he's kind of like, okay, screw you, old man, and then he chucks him down the elevator chute. So but he really had to ponder what the thing to do for himself was, because he's got these two aspects of his identity battling against each other. So it's not always as simple as you just making the right choice for you, because within you a lot of different versions of you exist. So understanding that you have to influence all the versions of yous into a state of harmony in order to almost be the conductor of that symphony, in order to utilize the light spirit body, or the Makaba, as it's called in Egyptian philosophy. If you want to utilize that force, if you want to fulfill that destiny of living happily ever after with your Padme or whatever, on some nice place like Naboo or whatever, or wherever does not have sand that's very irritating, then you have to really overcome that force of hate and not succumb to fear and desperation and suffering, really. Yoda says actually during that fear is a path to the dark side, and that anger leads to hate, hate leads to what was it? Hate leads to anger, anger leads to hate, something, and then it leads to suffering. But the point was that it doesn't go anywhere good, right? So really understanding that philosophy, that if you can walk through life with an open heart for not just like the things that you see around you in the world, but for the version of yourself that you are striving to become. Almost like Anakin before he was turned to the dark side. This guy was always willing to take risks, always willing to do whatever it took to, become the best Jedi he could and whatnot. And he wasn't concerned with any of those other things. It was that fear and that sense of future loss within him that caused him to go down the wrong road. But understanding that if you have the ability to stand in your own power, you have the ability to actively shape your own destiny. And you are the only person responsible for your own happiness at the end of the day. So releasing that hate really comes down to kind of the will and the seed of the self, or sword. And I think next week we might get into the concept of the Philosopher's Stone, actually, because the seed of self, or basically where the fire resides. I don't know if we could get that picture up again of the body. So as you can see, the yellow ray there actually represents what I'm pointing to here, because I can't draw fire really. Or really draw it all for that matter yet. I need some more practice. But point is that this center of fire actually depicts the mental body, or the aspect of the self, and it's almost what you can refer to as the sword of Michael, actually, because it helps cut the thread of karma that kind of influences your soul. So that's why Michael is kind of depicted as the strongest angel, and he's got his big sword, and he's pretty much undefeatable once he's got that sword in his hand, because this is essentially the ability to reshape your destiny and cut the karmic threads that would hinder you or block you. But to kind of accomplish getting that, or accomplish realizing that version of yourself, is incredibly difficult sometimes. But understanding that you always have the potential to be that version of yourself, and no matter how difficult it is, it's your choice always to keep going and to not give up, no matter how hard it gets, is something that it's your right to do. It's your right to keep going. It's your right to fulfill everything that you want to be and actualize to the highest version of yourself. That's your right. So understanding that when you can kind of utilize that sword within yourself, and the sword being yourself, really, or this version of ourselves that walks in the world, the ego, that you can almost go through this process of recrystallization. And I know this is a lot to kind of take in one episode, but essentially you're getting light going through a prism, and splitting into different forms, and kind of reflecting off different things, or refracting off different things, and it essentially is creating a shape, and that shape is the version of your mentality, which your mentality takes on. And it's in the form of fire, depicted as a form of fire, which is constantly changing. It's constantly adapting to the outside world. If you think about it, I'm seeing people walk outside the studio right now. That is me interpreting things at an insanely fast rate, and the brain just operates under those conditions normally. That's how quick the ability to comprehend information is in your mentality. So understanding that is constantly changing based on everything you observe in the outside world is really something to note, in terms of making yourself the version of yourself you want to be, and really creating that that perfect crystallized version of self. And that's what yogis are really doing most of the times when they're meditating. They are decrystallizing themselves and then recrystallizing themselves into the spirit form that they want to be in, because we are essentially almost no different than like water or rocks in a way. When you think of, like, for example, crystals, they bounce light around in the matrix and stuff like that, and they really create a certain energy to them in terms of they vibrate at a specific resonance or whatever. Water holds energy. We are 75% water. So water is really influenced by things like energy and sound and vibration. And when you can learn to influence the water and energy within yourself, then you really are transmuting yourself. That's a big word, actually, transmuting yourself into a higher form. You're transmuting yourself into something beyond what it was previously. And that is really something to kind of understand. The ability to transmute one thing into a higher form or into a different thing altogether. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to this. I'm going to actually reference some things. You can actually look into this guy called Masaru Emoto, who actually did some studies around basically the influence of sound on water, or the effect of sound on water, and how based on the different resonance and different frequencies, it can create different crystalline structures in the water and form different shapes. And when the frequency or resonance is more in tune with loving things, it creates more beautiful shapes in the water, creates more beautiful ice crystals and stuff like that. Since we are 75% water, there's probably some aspect to that is transferable. Also, I linked things to a San Diego college, which talks about the structured water, like the structured crystalline of water. And also, I linked something that links quartz resonators and trapped ions. I'm pretty sure this was in a like study done on the atmosphere, and this basically just talks about how crystalline structures like quartz actually interact with free ions in the atmosphere and whatnot. So, as I said, energy is all around you. Plasma is something, it's an ionized gas or something that is constantly enveloped in ions. So you have the ability to direct those ions in certain ways if you understand the effects of structures that have a fixed crystalline lattice. So, and the last thing I actually linked was the geomagnetic field that protects the Earth from electron showers or solar winds, which was similar actually to the image that I had up earlier around the magnetic field of the Earth and the charged particles. So essentially, this is kind of describing the science aspect to these processes around, water resonating in certain ways based on the energetic influences around it, and how the ions and charged particles actually provide energy for those to resonate in certain ways. And the last thing I linked was actually the outcome of quantum events actually occurring in a separate parallel universe, which was this article by Nature. So that's really what I just wanted to touch on, just in terms of the links to the studies and the information kind of done on the science aspect of that. But all the science is there, and if you kind of put things together, as I said, they do resonate in a certain harmony, as it would in an orchestra or symphony. And I know this is a lot of big concepts to kind of internalize and understand, but understanding that you do have the ability to connect with elemental forces around you, such as, the concept of plasma, or the force of plasma, and the force of light, and the force of air, which we're constantly reverberating and vibrating as we speak. Those are really big kind of concepts to take on and internalize and just kind of ponder in itself, and really kind of, I mean, you could take in your imagination kind of how far you want to go with those things, but those are very elemental forces that affect the nature of reality, right? Like we talked about a couple weeks ago, when I bang my hand on this table and it's producing sound, that's two forces going from kinetic energy to sound energy through various processes which involve repulsion and different things of shaking the actual structures, or atoms that exist within the structures to create sound. So there are a lot of different forces that kind of impact the other forces around them as things go through dynamic movement in the world. So, as I said, this is always a lot to take in, but I'm going to kind of sum it up here and kind of revisit the important point, or maybe the most important point in this episode, which is kind of, what I referred to as the sorcerer's spirit. Because if you think about it, we all are magic, and we do all have the ability to tap into this kind of force that exists around us, or this energy field that exists around us. And it really is dependent on the shape of your heart and the influence that your heart takes on in comparison to your will and your drive and your desire to do things, and your opinion of self and all these things. But when that's in alignment, you really have the ability to do anything and accomplish things that you maybe never thought possible, and go farther than you ever thought possible. So, yeah, I mean, that really just says it all. I mean, you can even kind of test some of this out yourself. Subtly, I would say that next time you want to achieve something like kind of really random, like maybe you're trying to reach for something and it's like just too far away for you to reach, try concentrating on the image of that thing actually coming to you or moving towards your hand, and you might find that you have just enough reach to get it, or it just falls into your grip. And that's something like really random, I know, but those are the kind of things where you can see really small I guess imprints in reality of some external force influencing things. You might think that, oh, this is so out of the ability for me to do, but when you kind of visualize it, or you put an intention behind your attraction to that thing, you become almost magnetized to it. That's the word I'm looking for. You become magnetized to it. So I would say that become magnetized, understand what that means in terms of what you want to achieve, and shape that eternal flame that exists within you to get whatever it is you want in life, whether it's a car, or a house, or whatever. Those are very material things, but maybe a long-lasting relationship, maybe a star-crossed lover or something like that. Manifest it, believe in it, and just see how far you can go. There's never going to be something negative that comes out of you believing in what you want wholeheartedly and doing whatever it takes to get there, with your unhurt heart and authenticity and vulnerability. So I think we're gonna sum it up there for today. That was a ton, but it always is. But you can go back and watch this over and over again as many times as you want. And you can follow me on Instagram at Top Sorcerer, and I will be here next week to provide you guys my my wisdom of, what I've learned from my experience. And again, I hope it just helps you to evolve as you go along too. So I will see you next week, and take care.